Africa needs China for its digital development, but at what price? Chinese government's Go Global strategy in Africa seems to be more engaging than any other nation. But what is in it for China? Of the estimated 2.6 billion people who remained offline in 2023, a large part lives in Africa. A key partner in Africa in unclogging this bottleneck is China. Several African countries depend on China as their main technology provider and sponsor of large digital infrastructural projects. But what are the risks with becoming dependent on China? Not only digital infrastructure, Africa is also expected to be dependent on China for finance as well, which provides a full package solution to Africa. What is the long-term implications Africa can have by this China-Africa trade? Let's uncover all these questions in this video, so be with us until the end. As part of its Go Global strategy, the Chinese government encourages Chinese companies to invest and operate overseas. The government offers financial backing and expects companies to raise the global competitiveness of Chinese products and the national economy. In the long term, Beijing seeks to establish and promote Chinese digital standards and norms. Research partnerships and training opportunities expose a growing number of students to Chinese technology. The Chinese government's expectation is that mobile applications and startups in Africa will increasingly reflect Beijing's technological and ideological principles. That includes China's interpretation of human rights, data privacy, and freedom of speech. This aligns with the vision of China's digital Silk Road, which complements its BRI, creating new trade routes. In the digital realm, the goal is technological primacy and greater autonomy from Western suppliers. The government is striving for a more Sino-centric global digital order. Infrastructure investments and training partnerships in African countries offer a starting point. Digital technologies have many potential benefits for people in African countries. They can support the delivery of healthcare services, promote access to education and lifelong learning, and enhance financial inclusion. But there are obstacles to realizing these benefits. The backbone infrastructure needed to connect communities is missing in places. Technology and finance are lacking too. In 2023, only 83% of the population of sub-Saharan Africa was covered by at least a 3G mobile network. In all other regions, the coverage was more than 95%. In the same year, less than half of Africa's population had an active mobile broadband subscription, lagging behind Arab states, 75%, and the Asia-Pacific region, 88%. Therefore, Africans made up a substantial share of the estimated 2.6 billion people globally who remained offline in 2023. A key partner in Africa in unclogging this bottleneck is China. Several African countries depend on China as their main technology provider and sponsor of large digital infrastructural projects. At least 38 countries worked closely with Chinese companies to advance their domestic fiber optic network and data center infrastructure, or their technological know-how. China's involvement was critical as African countries made great progresses in digital development. Despite the persisting digital divide between Africa and other regions, 3G network coverage increased from 22% to 83% between 2010 and 2023. Active mobile broadband subscriptions increased from less than 2% in 2010 to 48% in 2023. For governments, however, there is a risk that foreign-driven digital development will keep existing dependent structures in place. The global market for information and communication technology, ICT infrastructure, is controlled by a handful of producers. For instance, the main suppliers of fiber optic cables, a network component that enables high-speed internet, are China-based Huawei, ZTE, and the Swedish company Ericsson. Many African countries with limited internal revenues can't afford these network components. Infrastructure investments depend on foreign finance, including concessional loans, commercial credits, or public-private partnerships. These may also influence a state's choice of infrastructure provider. The African continent's territory adds to the technological and financial difficulties. Vast lands and challenging topographies make the rollout of infrastructure very expensive. Private investors avoid sparsely populated areas because it doesn't pay them to deliver a service there. Landlocked states depend on the infrastructure and goodwill of coastal countries to connect with international fiber optic landing stations. It is sometimes assumed that African leaders choose Chinese providers because they offer the cheapest technology. Chinese contractors are attractive partners because they can offer full package solutions that include finance. Under the EPC plus F engineer, Procure, Construct Plus Fund Finance scheme, Chinese companies like Huawei and ZTE oversee the engineering, procurement, and construction, while Chinese banks provide state-backed finance. Angola, Uganda, and Zambia are just some of the countries which seem to have benefited from this type of deal. All-round solutions like this appeal to African countries. Before we proceed further, discussing what can be the long-term implications for Africa by Chinese digital ecosystem and the trade of gold, oil, and copper, I'd like to hear from you. Are you finding this video informative? Feel free to share your thoughts and questions in the comment section below. And if you're finding it helpful, please consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Your support means a lot to us and helps us reach a wider audience and the content that you'll love. Let's continue this journey together. From a technological perspective, over-reliance on a single infrastructure supplier makes the client state more vulnerable. When a customer depends heavily on a particular supplier, it's difficult and costly to switch to a different provider. African countries could become locked into the Chinese digital ecosystem. Researchers like Arthur Guagua from the Ethics Institute at Utrecht University, Netherlands, believe that China's export of critical infrastructure components will enable military and industrial espionage. These claims assert that Chinese-made equipment is designed in a way that could facilitate cyber attacks. Human Rights Watch, an international NGO that conducts research and advocacy on human rights, has raised concerns that Chinese infrastructure increases the risk of technology-enabled dictatorship. In particular, Huawei has been accused of colluding with governments to spy on political opponents in Uganda and Zambia. However, Huawei has denied the allegations. Chinese involvement provides a rapid path to digital progress for African nations. It also exposes African states to the risk of long-term dependence. The preparation is to diversify infrastructure supply, training opportunities, and partnerships. There is also a need to call for interoperability in international forums such as the International Telecommunications Union, a UN agency responsible for issues related to information and communication technologies. Interoperability allows a product or system to interact with other products and systems. It means clients can buy technological components from different providers and switch to other technological solutions. It favors market competition and higher quality solutions by preventing users from being locked in to one vendor. Finally, in the long term, African countries should produce their own infrastructure and become less dependent. However, apart from digital infrastructure, the trade between China and Africa challenged economic headwinds in the first quarter of 2024, with two-way trade growing by 5.9% year-on-year to US $70.86 billion. This was despite a property crisis in China, which affected copper demand, with a downturn in copper prices towards the end of 2023. Experts have attributed the rise in trade to higher commodity prices during the period, as well as incentives introduced by Beijing to grow trade with Africa. China has also been buying more gold from Africa, adding to the increase. The figures from China's General Administration of Customs showed imports from Africa grew 8% year-on-year to US $29.42 billion in the first quarter. This was boosted by a rise in imports of critical minerals, in particular metals used for electric vehicle battery production, such as oil, copper, iron ore, and battery metals, including cobalt and lithium, while it largely exports finished industrial products. Meanwhile, China's exports to Africa increased 4.4%, rising to US $41.4 billion. The country, which is China's most important African trading partner, mostly sells metals to China, including gold, diamonds, platinum, manganese ore, iron ore, chromium ore, and zinc ore, while it buys broadcasting equipment, computers, electric batteries, motor vehicles, and electrical transformers. The soaring price of gold could go some way to explaining the rise in China-Africa trade. China had been buying gold since the West froze Russia's foreign exchange reserves after Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. Gold prices have soared, and so this might be part of Africa helping China change its foreign exchange reserves mix. Commodities, and particularly gold, are probably responsible for rising African exports to China. But recently, the price of two essential commodities, oil and copper, has been rising, mostly driven by increased demand and geopolitical risks, including Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the ongoing war in the Middle East. Gold, too, has been gaining in value. Commodities prices, as well as global security and economic dynamics, had played a role in the latest China-Africa trade figures. The competitiveness of Chinese finished goods like EVs, electronics, and solar panels remains strong, which means market dynamics also favor African demand for Chinese products for the calculable future. Overall, since much of Africa's exports to China are commodities, what do you think that would Africa be dependent on Chinese trade for long term? Or it is just the beginning, and Africa will become self-sufficient by learning the technological advancements from China? Let us know your opinions in the comments section, and don't forget to share the video and like and click on the subscribe button as well for remaining updated of the current trends in this fast-paced modern world. And don't forget that whatever the result may be, but African nations should learn a lesson of being self-sufficient from Mauritius, a small island country. We've already discussed this in one of our previous videos, which you can watch by clicking on the link in description. Until next video, stay tuned.